A petite, attractive young woman stands before a camera, smiling sweetly as she poses for photographs. But behind that smiling woman and her innocent facade lies one of the most calculated killers the United States has ever seen. What transforms a seemingly ordinary aspiring photographer into a perpetrator of one of the most brutal crimes in recent memory? That's the question we'll be exploring today. Welcome to GBRLIFE Transmissions. I'm your host, Caitlin, and you're listening to GBRLIFE of Crimes, where we explore not just what happened in crimes committed by women, but why and the psychology behind them. Today, we're examining one of the most sensational cases of the 21st century, a story of obsession, manipulation, and murder that captivated the nation. Who is behind this horrific story? Jodi Arias. The year is 2006, and at a business conference in Las Vegas, Jodi Arias meets Arias Alexander, a successful motivational speaker and businessman. Their connection is instant and intense, but what begins as a passionate romance would spiral into an obsession that would ultimately end in savage violence. But before we dive into that fatal meeting in Las Vegas, we need to understand where Jodi came from. Born on July 9th, 1980, in Salinas, California, Jodi Ann Arias and her childhood presents us with several red flags that psychologists now recognize as potential precursors to her later behavior. Growing up in a middle-class family with parents Sandy and William Arias, Jodi's early years were marked by what she later described as physical discipline that crossed into abuse. Her parents claimed that this was not true. However, she said that they would hit her with wooden spoons and belts. But here's what's fascinating from a psychological perspective. Whether or not the abuse actually happened or happened the way she stated, her perception of her childhood as traumatic would significantly impact her attachment style and relationship patterns. By age 7, Jodi was already showing signs of what psychologists call cognitive distortions. She had difficulty distinguishing between reality and her own narrative. Former classmates recall her as someone who would tell elaborate stories that seemed to blur the line between truth and fiction. This early pattern of reality distortion would later become a crucial element in her adult personality structure. Education was another area where we see early warning signs. Despite being described as intelligent, Jodi dropped out of high school in the 11th grade. This decision to leave school, a structured environment that provides both social connection and identity formation, suggests early difficulties with commitment and institutional attachment. What's particularly noteworthy about Jodi's adolescent years was her increasing isolation. Friends from this period would describe her as someone who could be intensely focused on certain relationships while seemingly detached from others. This all or nothing approach to relationships would later manifest in her adult life with devastating consequences, as we all know. By her late teens, Jodi had developed what psychologists call an insecure attachment style, and this typically develops when a child's emotional needs aren't consistently met, leading to difficulty trusting others, intense fear of abandonment, and tendency to idolize and then devalue relationships, and problems with emotional regulation. When children grow up in environments where emotional responses are unpredictable or where they feel they must perform to receive love, they often develop maladaptive coping mechanisms. In Jodi's case, these manifested as excessive people-pleasing behaviors, difficulty setting healthy boundaries, intense emotional dependence, and a pattern of unstable relationships. Her early romantic relationships followed a pattern that would become tragically similar. Friends report that even as a teenager, Jodi would become intensely involved with partners, often losing herself in relationships and showing extreme reactions to real or perceived rejection. And then comes her adult years. With her pattern of intensity and the time frame of having digital tools at our disposal at the time, Jodi's story is also historical due to the amount of digital evidence with cell phones, emails, and social media. It's how we have a better idea overall about her psychology and methodology. It's how we know that when Jodi Arias met Arias Alexander at the Prepaid Legal Services Conference in Las Vegas in September of 2006, it wasn't just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of what would become an intense, toxic relationship that would end in tragedy. Travis was a 30-year-old motivational speaker and successful businessman. He was immediately drawn to the 26-year-old Jodi, who approached him after one of his presentations. She liked what she saw, and he did too, because the chemistry was instant and electric. Within days of meeting, they were spending hours on the phone, exchanging lengthy emails and text messages. Friends of Travis recall him being completely captivated by Jodi, describing her as different from anyone he'd ever met. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite their intense physical attraction, here was an immediate complication. Travis was a devout Mormon, and Jodi wasn't. But remember, Jodi is all or nothing. So her red flags came out immediately when Jodi converted to Mormonism, just weeks after meeting Travis. And Travis didn't stop her, nor did he have any issue with it, because he was right there with her while she was getting baptized as her witness. And this rapid religious conversion is something we need to examine closely. Was it genuine spiritual awakening? Probably not. Or was it the first sign of what psychologists call identity absorption, where someone takes on the interests and beliefs of their romantic target? Their relationship quickly became physical, despite Travis's religious convictions. This created what psychologists call a Madonna whore complex situation, and Travis struggled to reconcile his physical attraction to Jodi with her religious beliefs and his religious beliefs, because they were now at this point both Mormon, while Jodi became increasingly obsessed with maintaining their connection at any cost. By February of 2007, they were officially dating, with Jodi even moving from California to Mesa, Arizona to be closer to Travis. Did anyone else see that coming? Of course we did. But here's where the relationship starts showing serious cracks. Travis has friends, of course, and they begin to notice many of the red flags that you can't see when you're blindly infatuated. Things like Jodi would show up unannounced at Travis's house, or she would eavesdrop on his conversations, which is very creepy. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Friends would catch her following Travis, and she would appear at events where she knew Travis would be, claiming it was just a coincidence. Creeped out yet? Me too. And Travis also decided the behavior wasn't right for him, because they broke up in June in 2007. But Travis and Jodi continued their physical relationship. This is what psychologists call a trauma bond, which is a powerful emotional attachment formed through intense, inconsistent experiences of pleasure and pain. Travis would later confide to friends that he felt used by Jodi, but couldn't seem to break away completely. Well, remember that digital evidence? It shows exactly why Travis couldn't just break away completely. There was so much intense expressions of love and devotion, but then there was explicit messages and religious discussions about guilt and morality, and then angry accusations and jealous outbursts. Travis tried to move on and distance himself regardless. One of his methodologies of distancing himself was to go ahead and start dating other women. Pretty common. So when he planned a trip to Cancun with another woman, Jodi became erratic. She would go into his Facebook and email accounts to find more information and then send threatening messages to women he dated. But it didn't stay behind the screen. She also showed up at his house in the middle of the night. All this after leaving long voicemails, going back and forth between apologizing and accusing Travis of anything negative she could think of. What's particularly chilling about this time frame is how Jodi maintained a facade of normalcy during this period. She was still booking photography jobs, maintaining friendly relationships with others, and posting normal social media updates. Then comes June 4th, 2008. Trigger warning. Travis Alexander is found dead in his shower with 27 stab wounds, a slit throat, and a gunshot to the head. The brutality of the crime shocked even seasoned investigators. But what's particularly noteworthy is what happens next. Jodi's behavior after the murder reveals fascinating insights into her psychology. First, there's a trip to Utah to see another man, creating an alibi. Then she told multiple stories. First story, I wasn't there. Second story, 2 intruders did it. Third story, it was self-defense. Let's deep dive into the psychology behind these shifting narratives. This kind of evolution in storytelling is actually pretty common in cases involving what psychologists call narcissistic injury. When someone with narcissistic traits faces rejection or humiliation, the progression from complete denial to claiming self-defense often indicates a person struggling to maintain their self-image while gradually being forced to confront reality. Now let's examine the key elements of Jodi's psychological profile. First of all, we have her narcissistic traits, where she has the grandiose sense of self-importance and the need for admiration, lack of empathy, and a sense of entitlement. But she also has borderline characteristics like the intense, unstable relationships, extreme fear of abandonment, identity disturbance, and impulsive behaviors. Then when we add in the childhood experiences of early trauma, attachment disruption, reality distortion, social isolation, along with possible narcissism, borderline characteristics even then, it's easy to see how a perfect storm of psychological vulnerabilities would later explode into violence. But that violence didn't make her great at covering her tracks. The evidence trail she left, from gas cans purchased to avoid detection to deleted photos recovered from a camera, it shows both careful planning and impulsive decision-making, a combination that psychologists often see in individuals with mixed personality disorders. And this mixture was something we all got to see for ourselves as the trial itself became a psychological spectacle. Jodi's 18 days on the witness stand revealed something crucial about her personality structure: her need to control the narrative. Even when it was clearly falling apart, her behavior in court displayed what forensic psychologists call cognitive rigidity, an inability to adapt her story even when faced with overwhelming contradictory evidence. These same psychologists might diagnose Jodi with a combination of borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, which I mentioned and you would have known, but also possible histrionic personality disorder. And what's particularly interesting is how these conditions interacted with external factors. The attention from the media, the public scrutiny, and the dramatic nature of the trial seemed to feed her pathology rather than subduing it. One of the most chilling aspects of this case is how it challenges our understanding of premeditation. The careful planning of buying gas cans to avoid Arizona receipts, borrowing plates, renting a car. It shows clear forethought. Yet, the frenzied nature of the attack suggests a loss of control. This contradiction offers valuable insights into how different personality disorders can create seemingly paradoxical behaviors. Jodi Arias' case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about obsession, manipulation, and the thin line between love and hate. In many ways, her story represents a modern evolution of criminal psychology, where old patterns of behavior meet new technology, creating breadcrumbs that lead investigators to the truth. The case also raises important questions about how we recognize and respond to warning signs like stalking. She may have displayed many of the normal stalking behaviors, like showing up unannounced or finding her way to the same events as Travis, but as much as those are big red flags, as much as we know in 2024, social media monitoring is also stalking, an action we should absolutely take more seriously. This has been GBRLIFE of Crimes, part of GBRLIFE Transmissions. I'm Caitlin, reminding you that understanding the darkness helps us appreciate the light. Join us next time as we explore another case that challenges our understanding of the criminal mind.